one dude literally spit in my face. Even like, are you Chinese or Japanese? I'm like, I'm Korean. They're like, yeah, Swiss cheese. I'm like, okay, I don't even. And trying to over succeed, trying to outperform everybody, maybe in the ways that you have, so that people couldn't shit on me or that people couldn't, I could say F you to the naysayers.
What's up, everyone? This is Justin Kahn. Welcome to my podcast, The Quest, where I dive into the ups and downs of trailblazers around me to help you figure out life and where you want to be. Before we start, bang that subscribe button for unfiltered conversations on tech, wellness, and entertainment dropping every Tuesday. Today, my guest is Eric Nam. Eric is a singer, songwriter, performer, and entrepreneur. He's one of the most popular K-pop artists with over 300 million streams. He also runs the #1 Korean podcast company with his two brothers. If you're interested in K-pop and Asian representation in media and entertainment, this is the episode for you. Enjoy.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here and joining me on my podcast.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
This is the
Excited to
first
be
time
here.
we've met, so like that's I'm excited to get to know you and learn about more about your story. But I kind of followed you online and you agreed to come on, and I'm stoked, man. It's nice to connect.
Likewise, thanks for having me. I think we probably have some mutual friends and people around, so super
Yeah,
excited to get to know you as well.
awesome. You grew up in Atlanta, right?
I did. I'm a Southern kid at heart, I guess. I was born and raised in Atlanta.
Yeah,
Went to school there, and yeah, when my parents got there, I think my dad's always like there were probably like 200 Koreans in all of Atlanta, 200 or 300, and so it was definitely not diverse, not as colorful as it is today. Definitely not blue like it is today. Um, but yeah, growing up was interesting in Atlanta. I think it's a great place to grow up. I have kind of like an odd relationship with it because I think my parents being immigrants, we luckily had like an aunt and some cousins who went to Atlanta before us, and they went through like this private school education thing. And my parents were like hell bent on making sure that we went through the exact same process that they did. Because it was like the repeated pattern for success. You do this, you get into an Ivy League, you figure it out, you get a job in finance, and that's what it was. And so um, I ended up going to a private school. All three of us, I have two brothers. We all ended up going to private school, and uh, it was an experience. I think it taught me a lot of things, but definitely there were a lot of challenges with it because when you go to a private school, they're hella expensive, and when you're kids of an immigrant family, you just feel so out of place because like just the conversations that are happening and like the I guess the benchmarks of success or wealth are just so different beyond anything that you've ever encountered. And so
yeah,
there's that. And then I think I was the only Asian kid my year when I entered. So it was just like a lot of cultural differences growing up. And I think, there were a lot of hard times, but it made me into the person that I am today, taught me a lot of things that I had to learn on how to deal with people from all different types of backgrounds. And that's kind of, I think, what propelled me into, my college years and then my career as right now, like a singer, songwriter, performer, entrepreneur. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know how granular you want me to get.
no, I love to get in depth. That really reminds me of my own experience because my mom was an immigrant from Malaysia, and I grew up in
Mhm.
Seattle. I'm a few years older than you, but I think you're my youngest brother's age. So I have two younger brothers. We all went to private school,
Okay.
and it was kind of like in Seattle. And I went to school with two Asian kids. It was like,
Mhm.
um, and some of the things that you said that resonated with me were that it was so weird being my dad was pretty poor growing up, and then my mom was an immigrant, and so I would see people who would like drive a Beamer to school, and their dad,
Mhm.
their parents worked at Microsoft or something like that, and be like, wow,
Right.
like these people are like, I'm like coming from a totally different world, and I think that
Right.
drove a lot of, for me, it drove a lot of like desire to like become wealthy and be somebody, which was
Mhm.
I guess it served me in some ways, and then it didn't serve me probably in other ways. Like as I, became more successful and like still had that like unhealthy obsession with like being more
Mhm.
successful and more successful. So I really resonate with that. I'd love to like know, like, what were some of the tough parts for you of growing up? Um, or were there any, like, in terms of like kind of growing up as maybe a little bit of an outsider, or like growing up Asian in Atlanta?
Um, I mean, I definitely there were. I mean, I think, I want to. I don't want this to feel like a blanket statement, but I feel like everybody goes through, bouts of bullying or that kind of stuff. But for me, I just felt like such an outsider. I remember, like one point, one dude literally spit in my face, just as we were walking to the locker room to gym, and I was just like, I didn't even know how to react. Um,
Yeah.
I was just so jarred by the experience. Um, and there were just like a lot of microaggressions where I think growing up right now, if I'm a teenager right now in 2021, like it's very different from when I was growing up too. It's just like there's so many microaggressions and things that are passive that you don't realize are racist, but in hindsight, you're like, holy shit. Like, like
Like,
even just like I don't know. It was just like so many little things from just
like, did
like
you
the
bring
way
dog
I
for
look or
lunch? Yeah. Or
yeah,
like,
just
where are
like
you
small
from? Where are you
things.
from?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I don't want to like understate it, but like at the same time, it just feels like so overdone. Like I feel like this is such a common experience and like we've talked about it and like, it's important that we talk about it, but like it's even like, are you Chinese or Japanese? I'm like, I'm Korean. They're like, yeah, Swiss cheese. I'm like, okay, I don't even like you sound like an idiot because you don't know that Korea is a country. Like, why is this funny? Like, it's just so many things where
Yeah.
I was, I don't know. I think a lot of it, like, as it goes into survival mode where you're just like, you know what, I'm just going to shut up and like do what I can the best I can so that I can get out of here. And for me, I think that kind of was, you know, I was never the smartest. I was never like the most athletic. Um, but there were things that I felt like I could excel at, and that was probably in music, and then just trying to be a good person. I think that was like my biggest thing, just like trying to be as sociable as possible, even if it wasn't with like students. Even with like, I was probably closer to teachers than like some of the students, but they were always looking out for me, and it was kind of a way for me to figure out how to like handle the real world within this weird microcosm of people. And so once I got to college, I think I was ready to just kind of, you know, explode and just kind of try everything in so many different ways. So um, I think in many ways, as when you're young, like because we didn't have representation, you only know what you see and what you're told you're able to do. Like
Yeah.
I remember like my high school thesis was like about misrepresentation of Asian people in media. Um, this is like what 11th grade or 12th grade. I don't know what drew me to that, but clearly there were issues going on for me to write about that, about why like you know Jackie Chan and Lucy Liu and all these weird exoticized characters from the history of Hollywood really why should just that inform me as a person, that kind of thing. And so um, looking at my high school experience, it was a lot of things where I was just trying to get out, survive. Once I got to college, I was like, okay, the world is mine. Let's try this thing all over again. And that's where I think I really had a great time. I really kind of fell into my stride and wanted to be an active participant in breaking down stereotypes and trying to over succeed, trying to outperform everybody, maybe in the ways that you have, so that people couldn't shit on me or that people couldn't I could say F you to the naysayers.
Yeah, I that really resonates with me because I felt like an outsider my whole like youth, when I was young, and it wasn't until I was much later as an adult, like a couple of years ago, that I realized that everything I was doing in my life after I, became, after high school and, in college, and then as an entrepreneur, as a, young adult, and started Twitch and starting all these other companies, everything I was doing was just to prove, like, to get the approval of outside people, like that
Hmm.
that I felt like I didn't get when I was a kid. And it was all subconscious,
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
mental model that I developed when I was younger, but then I was like living it out in
Hmm.
my adulthood. And,
Yeah.
so I really resonate with that. Like, so how, once you got to college, where do you go to school? And like, how did you, um, how did you find your stride?
Yeah, so I went to Boston College, and it was I don't talk about this very much, but so I went to Boston College because I had like a deferred acceptance to Cornell. And my parents were like, you have to go to Cornell. Like, you need to go to Cornell. It's an Ivy League. You're going to Cornell. I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I should just go to UGA. Like, if you're dead set on me going to Cornell, I might as well just go to like UGA. It's like so much cheaper. But they're like, no, no, no. Cornell is cold, and you need to get used to the cold. You like Southern uncultured child. So they were like dead set on me going to somewhere in the north. So I ended up going to Boston College, and it was supposed to be for like a year. And I was like, well, I'm here. We're paying crazy tuition. I might as well make the best of it. And this is going to sound so nerdy, but I applied for this program called the Shaw Leadership Program, and they picked 20 freshmen and they put them into a house. It was 9 girls and 11 guys in one house, on upper campus. And so for me, it was like, cool. I get to, like, if I make it, I get to be part of this, like, these leadership thing, but I also guarantee a spot on upper campus, which means I don't have to take the bus every day to get to class. And that was my motivating factor. But I think once I got there, it takes a certain personality, I'm sure, to apply for a leadership house. But it was just a lot of really, really highly motivated, sharp kids around me. And so I was suddenly found myself I don't think we were competitive with each other, but we all came from a place of like, let's make the most of these 4 years kind of thing. And so we
Yeah.
really, I think, drove each other to be proactive in finding opportunities to get involved on campus in so many different ways. For me, I don't know, it was kind of wild, like the amount of things that I did. I probably tried like every club possible. I was part of student government for most of my years there. And then I tried like a few articles at the newspaper because apparently they pay for your food. I was trying out for the a cappella group, which I got rejected from because apparently I wasn't good enough of a singer at the time. I was doing service trips. I founded a service trip to Kenya with my friends. It was just a little bit of everything. And I was waitering at the faculty dining room and then volunteering downtown as part of a course. So it was a lot. I think the one thing that, because I had so much open to me in terms of opportunity, I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to take a step back and be like, yo, chill out and like actually enjoy things. But it was just like this inner drive of like, I have to achieve everything. I have to try everything just so I don't regret anything. I think that's just kind of my personality. And so I tried it, and then I got like burnt out by sophomore year. And so sophomore year, I was like, you know what, junior year, I'm going abroad. I'm going to go abroad, and then it's going to force me to not be involved in like all these clubs and things. And so I ended up going to Beijing for a semester, and then I was going to go to Spain for a semester. But I ended up in Beijing, and I liked my experience there so much. I ended up staying for a full year, and it was one of the coolest experiences in my life because I feel like the media tells us one thing about China, and I wanted to make those decisions on my own. I wanted to make informed decisions about how I feel about what's going on in terms of, the political landscape and socioeconomic kind of, conversations that were going on. And so that was definitely a great opportunity. And then I coming back senior year, and I was like, okay, this is my last year. What can I do to really make an impact? I feel like I've done a lot for myself. I've really done a lot in terms of trying out these really cool courses, being a part of so many different aspects of campus life. I studied abroad. I remember like people called me like, can you run for class president? I was like, there's no way I would run for like student government president. That sounds like unnecessary stress on so many levels. And
Yeah.
so what I ended up doing was, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's this organization called Collaboration. And it's like a platform / like talent show for Asian Americans, to kind of showcase our talents. And I think back then, it was just like, today we have more people in media, in TV and music and film just coming up. But 10 years ago, even then, it was just such a different conversation. So for me, I was like, this is where I feel like I could pull my experiences, my connections, and my love for arts and everything, and kind of have it culminate in one really cohesive experience. And so most of my senior year was kind of dedicated to that and building that out, and building
So
like a
you were
really cool
running it.
movement there. Yeah, so I was like
You
the founding executive director of the Boston branch, and
gotcha.
so that was kind of what I did. And yeah, I don't know. I felt like I was hyperactive, and I needed to try everything. And thank God I did, because otherwise I'd probably be regretting it to this day.
So that the collaboration that kind of sets you on being interested in well, you it sounds like you were already interested in media and specifically Asian American, Asian Americans' place in the media, and collaboration was
Mhm.
like a kind of a step in that direction.
Yeah, it was definitely a step in that direction. I think, going back to, like, I know for people who are listening, like, this dude sounds like he's all over the place. I'm really bad at talking about myself, and B, part of it is because I am all over the place. So kind of to backtrack a little bit, like, while I was so involved with everything on campus, I still felt this pressure to perform academically, and end of the day, college for me was like, you got to get a job, you know, and so outside of all these activities, I was always interning. I tried out so many different things in that sense too. I started investment banking, and then I went into like seed stage venture support internship. And then in China, I was at The Economist working for the chief economist, and the Monitor Group doing like translations at the time. And then come junior year, my summer, I was at Deloitte doing strategy consulting as an intern. And so I accepted the offer. I was going to be a strategy operations consultant, business analyst in New York. And I was like, okay, life set. I've achieved literally everything as like a 21-year-old little kid. I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. What's
Yeah.
next? And that's when it hit me. I'm sure, like you're saying, like when you had all the success, you're like, okay, I'm still like, I don't think I'm happy. I think that was that moment for me.
Yeah.
I remember my friends or people around me was like, dude, you literally have a job. You have like all these things. You've set all these things up. Like, you got all these awards. Like, you're doing great. Now just like live your life. But to me, that was like the most terrifying thing that I could think of. Like, I was like, is this it? Like, is
Yeah.
this all there is to this entire like crazy rat race thing that I've like subjected myself to? And I kept thinking to myself at like age 30, and then I was just like, okay, so I'm just gonna be 30, married with kids, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But at that moment, it was just there could be like that was the least appealing thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so I decided to apply to a couple fellowships that would take me abroad again. Growing up, um, the one thing that I think was consistent is just kind of like this heart and this need to be active for other people. And so every summer in high school, I would spend a summer in Latin America. And so I would, in Panama, in Mexico, in Guatemala, doing service work, learning the language, doing that kind of stuff. And um, in college, we did Kenya and Bolivia. And then I was like, I would really like to make nonprofit work my full-time job. And when I told my parents that freshman year, my mom, of course, was like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You are paying this tuition to not make any money. And so I think it was something that I had always wanted to do. And the way that my mom, I love my mom, not hating on her. She's just like, just make money and donate it. That's like the most practical thing. Like, you don't need to go to like whatever country and do whatever. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna talk to Deloitte. I'm gonna ask for a year off, like a sabbatical kind of thing. And if they give me that, I'll sign the contract and I'll go work afterwards. So I got into a program that would take me to India to work on social enterprises. But before I went, I had promised myself, like, okay, you have two passions. It's clearly like nonprofit, that kind of stuff, but also music. It's always been this thing that's always been in the background. I did like YouTube covers of me singing in my dorm room. And
Where did that
if
come
I
from?
have,
Were
I've
you, were
always
your
just loved
parents
music.
musical?
No, they're not. my dad has a good voice, but like my mom, she just does not care. And my dad, he just sings around the house. And even when it came to music, it was like, you are going to play the cello and the piano. And if you are going to sing, you will only do opera. And I was like, this is horrible. I'd rather just not sing. Um, but so I think it was like always just like a passion of mine. And so the only outlets that I had at that time were just like online blog forums. And then when YouTube happened, I was like, okay, this is really embarrassing, but we'll see like what the response is. And I'd be like, oh my God, 100 people watch this. Oh my God, 1,000 people watch this. Oh, 10,000, that's huge. And it was like such a fun, like stress relieving way for me to have like a creative outlet outside of work or academics. And I remember it was like, I've made that promise. It's like, when you take this year off, if you get the opportunity to pursue music, you have to take it. And
Yeah.
the night before I left to India, I had put up like a cover of like a K-pop band. And I went to India, and while I was there, I was like, I got there, I was quickly very jaded and like I think I fell into like a depression for the first time in my life. And I was like, this is not for me, for so many different reasons. But it was during that time that I got a call to come to Korea for pretty much like the Korean equivalent of American Idol. And that's where like the music side kind of started to take off.
What was the tell me about being depressed in India. What do you think didn't meet your expectations or triggered it, or like why then?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think I'd gone into it with like the best of intentions of like, I've always been really excited about startups, um, and I love the idea of like the social startup, social enterprise, and how do we take business and make it for good in the best ways possible. And that was what had initially attracted me to this gig. And so I got there, and it just wasn't what I had hoped and expected it for me, I should say. I don't want
Yeah.
to speak to everybody's experience. I'm sure from some people, it's been an amazing, incredible experience, but for me, it just wasn't the right fit. And so I quickly found myself like just really struggling for the first time, really struggling with what am I supposed to do? How do I deal with this? And like, do I just suck? Like, I think that was like a thing. I was like, do I just suck? Like, is it my fault that I can't deal with this? Um, but it was just tough because like, I got there and I'm thinking like, oh, we're going to build like really cool businesses and that kind of stuff. And not, and this in itself is a very important business, but it was like private education for low income families. But I don't know a thing about that. And it was like, when I got there, it was like, okay, please help take attendance and teach English. And I was like, okay, well, I can and I will, but I don't know if this is the most conducive way to create
Yeah.
change, And I think that was where it started to kind of like, slowly hit me in like a different way. And so for the first time, it was like, I would not want to go to sleep because that means I would have to wake up in the morning. And waking up in the morning, I would just like lay in bed because I knew that the moment I rolled out, I'd be like, I have an entire day that I have to get through somehow. And
No.
it was just like really, I've never felt that way until that point. And I don't think I've felt that way since then. But having to deal with that was just like, okay, clearly you need to make a change. And so um, I had put in my notice, like, I think I'm going to go back. I'm going to start my job early. They had put together like a special start date back in New York. And it was once I had given my notice of like, I think I'm going to leave, I can help on like consulting on how to maybe make this into a better program for you guys. And that's what they had asked me to work on. Once I expressed that I was like not happy, but it was like the next day I got a email from Korea, and
Yeah.
it was like, come to Korea. And I was like, this is the wildest thing. Um, and I thought it was like a scam because it was just my Korean, I could barely speak Korean, I could barely read Korean. And it just said like, please send us your passport. I was like, this is definitely like, this is to bring somebody in like whatever country in Wakanda. or like in some Luxembourg, like send me your transcripts or whatever. But I was so desperate that I was like, all right, I'll send just enough information so they can book me a flight. And if they book me
Yeah.
the flight, I will go. Um, and like within a few days, I got the flight, and I was just like, free flight to see my family in Korea at least. And then I just went.
That's such amazing serendipity.
Yeah,
It's kind of beautiful how life works out like that sometimes. And
absolutely. It's,
so that was the start. So then you competed in the show and kind of launched your career.
yeah. So
Well,
I, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna ask, like, what's it like as a Korean American going back and or not back, but going to Korea and navigating the music industry there?
Um, it's a lot. It was a lot. Um, it was really cool because, being a singer, it's like one of those things where you're just like, I'm gonna be an astronaut, or I'm gonna be like whatever idealistic thing you have as a kid, you know. I think even as a fifth grader, if you're like, what do you want to be? It's like, I'm gonna be in like on stage singing like the coolest songs ever. But going back to like, we never saw that. Like, we never saw an Asian or Asian American pop star in the States. Like, I don't think we were ever allowed to dream that. The only place I saw it was like on those VHS videos that my parents would rent from the corner store on a Sunday, um, from Korea. And that was like the only place I saw it. So I was like, one day if I go to Korea, I'm gonna try to like, maybe I'll get like cast from on the streets. I'm like, hey, you look like you could sing, and have some random like, you know, divine intervention moment. And so when I got there, it was like the coolest, like most interesting thing because, you know, on these audition programs, you are surrounded by all these hopefuls, and then you see all these like celebrity judges, people that you've like listened to and looked up to your entire life. And I was like, I can't believe I'm singing this person's song in front of him. This is the wildest thing. And so from like a personal, like experiential experience, it was really, really cool. I think navigating culturally was like a really, really difficult part. Um, because my Korean wasn't great, and I barely understood anything when it came to like anything technical, or it was just like, I'm hungry, I'm sleepy, leave me alone, please. Like those very elementary kind of statements.
Yeah.
But working and living there is just a completely different thing. So I remember being in trouble all the time for things that I didn't realize I was in trouble for. Even just
Like
like
what kind of things?
like even like in Korean culture, like saying hello the proper way is such an important thing. It's about respect. It's about like social hierarchy, but it's not like who's wealthier or whatever. It's just age, age and who's more experienced. So I would just say hi, but it wouldn't be like a complete 90-degree like bow and like very clearly articulated, because again, my pronunciation sucks, and like this person doesn't know who I am. Like, why would I have to say hello? But it's just like, you have to say hello and bow to everybody. I was always in trouble for that. I remember one time we were in like a dance class, and all my members, or everybody there was getting like yelled at. I have no idea why we're in trouble, why anybody's getting yelled at. So I'm just standing there like listening with my arms crossed. And I started getting yelled at because I had my arms crossed. I was like, I don't know like how to stand. Like, apparently I can't stand comfortably. So then I put my hands behind my back, and they're like, that's even more disrespectful. I was like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, everything that I'm doing is wrong. Um, so even small things to that. And then like, I think from a cultural level, like, oh, also that like when somebody's speaking to you in the States, if you're being spoken to, you look at them in the eyes, right? Like, it's a conversation. But in Korea, you look at the ground. I also did not know that. So I'm like, every time I'm in trouble, I'm getting trouble for being in trouble, and then also trouble for not being in trouble properly. It was like the most convoluted, confusing thing. And that's just like one example, but it's, I think even just the nuances of expressing ourselves as Americans, like, I think on a TV perspective, they wanted me to be like, oh my God, I need this so bad. Without this show, my life falls apart and I'm going to start crying. And so they were like always trying to like get me to cry or like do something. I was like, I just don't, like, I have a job, guys. Like, this is a hobby for me. And I remember being sat down and yelled at because they're like, you don't want this like anybody else, and everybody else is blah 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 blah, and you're just so rude and disrespectful. I was like, how? Like I literally I can't speak the language. How am I disrespectful when I can't even say anything? Um, and that was just the start of it. And I think just, I've been in Korea for about 10 years now, and just navigating all the small nuances that come with living and working in a different culture has always been difficult. And I've picked it up a lot, and my Korean has become pretty much fluent, and I can do pretty much everything on my own. But even to this day, I think because of those experiences, I find myself second guessing and questioning everything that I do. It's like a survival instinct. Where like, am I gonna get yelled at? I'm definitely gonna be in trouble for this. I'm always like looking behind my back. Um, so I definitely, I still deal with that to this day. But it is what it is.
Yeah, that's a hilarious story. But I'm sure it was horrible to live at the time. Um, how so tell me, like, how did your career take off from that? Like, you're in there like competing in the show, you didn't really care that much. I mean, you had the job that you were going to go back to. Like, what happened for you that made it a permanent thing?
Yeah. So I kind of told myself like, let's try 2 to 3 years, see what happens. So I got a record deal.
Did you win
And
the
in
show?
Korea, I did not. I got to top five. Did not win the show. And then I met with a ton of labels, and pretty much I signed with one, had like a shorter contract because I was like, if it works, it works. And like, I'll resign. If it doesn't, like, I should just leave. There's no point. Um, and I ended up doing music, but TV is what really kind of kicked off my career outside of like the audition program. Um, I started to do a lot of emceeing and hosting and guesting on TV shows, variety shows, reality shows. And the one that really kind of kicked off is I was doing like the equivalent of e-news. I was like mini Mario Lopez in Korea, interviewing celebrities. Um, so originally I went in just to do like the international conversation. So like my first interview, I think, was like Robert Downey Jr. And then it was, Matt Damon and Benedict Cumberbatch and Emma Stone and Jamie Foxx, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And so um, what I realized is like people really enjoyed watching me connect with people in a way that wasn't like a superficial like, tell me about the movie, and do you know kimchi, and do you like Gangnam Style and bulgogi kalbi, whatever Korean word they could throw at. And so having more informed discussions and conversations with these big stars, and while like teasing bits of Korean culture, and I think is what really brought me to this another level of the Korean general public, like knowing who I was, getting really excited about the stuff I was doing. And that just kind of skyrocketed me into just like bigger shows, bigger music, all that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how it all kind of took off. And it's been quite a ride. I feel like I've literally done the weirdest stuff on TV you could think about, from being fake married to drinking, like, like survival programs, like eating field rats and surviving in like freezing Mongolian mountains, like the weirdest stuff. But it's been quite a ride, and it's been fun the entire time.
That's amazing. So, in a way, I was going to ask you, like, if there was anything about being an American that had helped you in your career. It sounds like actually being able to kind of be this bridge to celebrities and guests who are coming to Korea, and the Korean audience was like one thing that really helped propel you.
Yeah, I think, uh, there were definitely difficulties in being like American and coming from such a different culture, but I think at a certain point, it kind of played to my strengths, allowing me to kind of play that bridge role. Um, but also like, I think I started to play up the fact that I like didn't know what was going on, and it came off in a way that was more endearing than annoying, and thankfully. And that was kind of the way I got into the conversations for a lot of different things. And I think that's something that that bridging that gap has been very critical to my career, even to this day. I think the things that I'm working on right now, the things that I'm building, the projects that I'm a part of, they're all kind of based in this thing of, how do we continue to bridge the gap between cultures and provide more representation and visibility. So yeah.
What are those things? Can you tell me about some of those projects?
Oh man. Yeah. So I work on a lot of different things. I guess the biggest one right now is I have a company with my brothers that we co-founded about a year and a half ago. Um, and it's called Dive Studios. And pretty much it started at my kitchen counter in Korea. We were looking at like the best ways for artists to connect with fans. And as everybody knows, Facebook, Instagram, all these social media platforms, it's all algorithmically driven. And so even if I put something out into the universe, chances are majority of my fans aren't going to see it. So how do we engage like the biggest super fans? And at that moment, it was like, what if we try podcasts? Like people who really love listening to me are going to come to this podcast for updates on me and my life. And nobody in the K-pop space had done a podcast before. So we tried it out, we put it out into the world. We hit #1 and #2 in I think like 28 or 29 countries. And we were like, oh, this is really interesting. Like it seemed like somewhat of a minimal effort at the time, but we did really well. And so what happened is we started to find other friends and like my peers and people who were like, you know what, podcast might be the future, guys. Like audio is the future. Like let's dig into it. And so we ended up making what started as like kind of a side project into like a full business podcast network. So right now we have studios in LA and in Seoul. We have I think like 14 shows under our belt, maybe 6 or 7 that are actively going. The majority of them are in English, hosted by a bunch of different K-pop stars and legends in their own right. And that's what we've been working on for the most part. And then as we've been trying to figure out how do you run a startup, and we have all these investors and backers and figuring all that kind of startup stuff out, it's also figuring out how do we scale this into like a real business that isn't reliant simply on podcast advertising, because as I'm sure you may know, it's not the most reliable source of income. So what ended up happening, and please feel free to cut me off whenever, because I do talk quite a bit.
I love this.
So what ended up happening is we realized that like podcasting in Korea had a very negative connotation, because when podcasts first entered the market, it was all politically driven, and it was very just like it was very polarizing in many ways. So I didn't know this until much later, but there were just a lot of things that had happened, I guess, in the podcast space that had turned people off from podcast. So right now it's a much older listenership. And I don't think the shows and the charts are like as dynamic as we see everywhere else in the world. And so when we approached like different K-pop artists or companies to join, we had a really hard time convincing them to consider doing audio podcasts, because for the amount of time and the resources that are put into it, like the returns on investment can be very, very minimal. And so we're like, this doesn't seem to make sense right now, maybe because we're too early to the market and monetization. Even in the States, we're figuring it out. But in Asia, it's like even further behind. So what we've been doing is we've been really tracking like what are things that our audience, our fans of Dive, but also fans of our artists really like, that they find the most value from. Where do they derive the most impact and value? And we realize it's around conversations that our celebrity hosts have that are very intimate, that are deep, and they are centered around things that they generally wouldn't talk about anywhere else. And so that
Yeah.
ended up in us creating a new audio platform, and it's called Mindset. And we just launched it like 3 weeks ago, but it's pretty much a collection of audio stories that are kind of autobiographically driven, and we take moments from my life and all these other lives, and we tell them in this beautifully crafted way, just really giving fans what they really want to know about their favorite artists, and allowing artists to be incredibly vulnerable about their stories, because we're making sure that the stories are told in the right way, in a very safe way. And so that's kind of like what has consumed my life, I'd say, for the past year, outside of being a musician. And what we realize is like the traction's been great, the feedback's been great. You know, people love the podcast as a more casual way to listen and to do it while you're driving or showering or whatever. And then mindset is much more of a deep impact, um, mental health, wellness kind of thing that is filling a white space in the audio market. So that's kind of what we're doing at the moment. And that's been my full-time job for I don't know how long. And on the side, when I get a moment, I'm working on an album. So that's what's going on right now.
So same as back when you were in college, doing many different things. I
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know how you feel. Like, are you the same way? Do you have to have like a billion things going on?
yeah. I have like so many things going on right now. I raised a $50 million fund to invest in startups, and have been investing. And we always have, probably 4 or 5 deals going on that we're thinking about
Hmm.
doing. And then I started this podcast, like just to, because I love connecting with people. And like back
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I never felt like I knew how to connect with people. And so then as an adult, I kind of learned how, and I felt like this podcast was just a great way to have a conversation, to get to know someone, and
Yeah.
so I do this podcast, and then I've started making a YouTube video, and I'm probably back where you were when you were in high school, where I'm like 10,000 views. That's like amazing. One of my videos I dropped has like 200,000 views, and my mind was just completely blown. I was like, this
It's
is amazing.
huge.
Yeah. So I'm just having fun with it, telling stories, but I got a lot, and then incubating some companies too, like
Mm,
some different companies. So I always like have a lot going on, really interested in the wellness space and vulnerability,
hmm.
because it's been something that has really helped me connect with people and just feel like I've been seen, in a way that I never
Yeah.
did when I was younger. One
Yeah.
thing I wanted to ask about your new startup was working with your brothers. Um,
Hmm.
I I've worked with both my brothers in different capacities in the past. One of my brothers was my first intern at Justin TV, which is the
Oh,
company that
wow.
turned into Twitch.
Right.
And then he went on to become the co-founder of his company, Cruise. That's a self-driving car company. That's
Awesome.
It's like huge now. They just, there is like almost $10 billion, I think. So
Wow.
yeah, he's gone on to do like these amazing things.
That's
But
incredible. Yeah.
we worked together on a couple startups, and then I work with my youngest brother on a wellness app. Actually, that's it's kind of like a habit
Oh,
formation app,
oh,
and
cool.
I love working with my brothers.
Yeah.
It's fun because we have, you come from the same background, same values, so it just feels like there's more of a mind meld often than,
Hmm.
kind of another other contexts where I've worked with other people. And I just want to hear what your experience has been with working with your brothers.
Yeah. Um, I think it's so funny that you guys are three brothers and we're three brothers as well. And it's
Yeah,
so you're the oldest.
yeah, I'm the oldest, and I kind of
Okay.
got them
Yeah,
into
me too.
tech.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm probably similar in that I'm the oldest and I got them into music and entertainment, I guess. So it's been, long story short, it's been really good. But to give you a little backstory, so I graduated in 2011, and both my brothers are soccer players. So they went to college for soccer, and like Eddie, he's 2 years younger than me. He was like, I think I want to be like a sports agent and really want to kind of work in that space. Um, but then, like, as my career started taking off, I kept seeing opportunity outside of Korea for K-pop. You know, I was getting hit up for a lot of different things, but what we realized is that K-pop companies were not set up for international exposure in any way. Um, and so I would be emailing people pretending like I was somebody else about myself. I would be like signing like contracts and like reading, making notes and like making deal points. And I was like, I can't do this like constantly. So I kind of, Eddie, my second brother, he'd always been like managing some of my social media and like wanting to help in some way. I was like, okay, Eddie, I'm going to borrow your name. You're going to be my manager. And he also wanted to kind of fill into that space. And it just so happened he was working at William Morris as an assistant to one of the music agents there. So he was working on like Sam Smith and Adele and all these things. And he was like, actually, I think I want to manage full time. So he definitely struggled. We struggled for a while because I definitely wasn't making enough money to like support fully. But as we started to make really cool moments with interesting collaborations, interesting press things, interesting performances, he started getting seated in with other acts, really, really big acts, bigger than me at the time. And still some of them are huge. And he started up his own management company, EN Management. And so that's what he does, managements, artists and writers and producers. And so it's been great working with him. And then Brian, he's 8 years younger than me. So like that's a big difference. I'd say
Yeah.
8 years, that's almost 10 years. That's like almost a decade. Um, he he went to Columbia and he was on the finance route. So he was going to do private equity and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. Like you can manage my money later down the road. We don't need more people in entertainment. And my mom was like, you guys better not take him into entertainment. Like I will literally kill you guys if he does not have a stable job. But he pretty much did all these internships, had a great job, like a crazy, super competitive job. And he came out after his internship to Korea just to hang out for a few weeks. He was like, I've been sleeping on my office floor for like 3 days out of the week. I'm miserable. I'm out of shape. I'm just going to come hang out in Korea. Cool. The dude never went back. He never went back. So he came to hang out. And, you know, it's just interesting because, like, I think because of like the different circles in which I kind of work and like have exposure to, I'm always hit up for different opportunities to advise or consult or invest or that kind of stuff. And I was like, you know, do you want to help vet some of these deals or do you want to kind of pursue some of these things? And that's where he just ended up being like, you might as well make some more content, do the podcasting. And it just kind of grew and built on its own. I'll say with Eddie, like because we're closer in age, and I think we're very clear when we first started, I was like, I'm going to tell you things that you don't want to hear, but that's because I have to play like quote unquote the role of your boss for a little bit. With Brian, we haven't lived together or worked together since he was 10.
Yeah.
So there's like a period of 10 years where I didn't live or see this kid. And it's just like, we are so different in terms of personality. And so I think there are definitely moments where we clashed a lot, and especially early on, because I was like, A, I'm older than you by 10 years, show me some respect. B, he's like, you're an old man, you don't know what you're talking about. There's a lot of things, but I think at the end of the day, and I don't know how it was for you, but like when we were getting investment, people are like, what is going to happen like if you guys fight? And we are worried about you being brothers. And I was like, I think that's like you're saying, a strength, because we know each other so well. Like, and even if we wanted to, we can't separate each other. We're family, we're blood. Like it's not possible. So it's almost better that like we can fight it out and then the next day we're good. Like I think we have a thing where like we don't go to bed without us being in a bad mood. Like even if we are like annoyed, we're like, okay, we handled it, let's move on. And I think I had to make it very clear where it's like anything I say, I'm going to make it very clear for you. There's going to be the business side where like, I don't agree with you on a business thing. And there's going to be moments where I don't agree with you. And I'm saying this as your brother, as somebody who loves you. And that I think has really allowed us to have fruitful conversations about how we work and function as brothers and as co-founders.
That's amazing. I love that. And it can be so rewarding to work with your brother. You know, I remember having moments where I like looked around and I'm like, wow, I really helped set them up, you know, in a way. And I feel like I did something for my family, you know, that have been really rewarding to me. And my middle brother is interesting. I think he was always like sick of like, cause he came to Silicon Valley, like maybe 3 or 4 years after, maybe 5 years after I was there. Cause he was like 4 years younger in school. So like, he got a job with a friend of mine as his first job, and he was always like Justin's brother, you know, because I had this company with Justin TV and then Twitch, and like people knew who I was. I was like very extroverted and outgoing and connected in Silicon Valley, and so people would just be like, "Oh, that's Justin's brother," and he was like so sick of that shit, you know. It's like and finally I remember when they sold their company Cruise, the self-driving car company in 2016, it was like I felt like he got, like a weight lifted off, and it was like
Yeah.
now it's like I'm like Daniel's brother, Dan's like the man.
Yeah.
He was like in all these articles and stuff, is like,
Yeah.
this guy kid who built this self-driving car company. And um
Hmm.
I was like so happy for him, just to that he was
Yeah.
like no longer had to be like Justin's brother or whatever, who's
Yeah.
doing this thing. Yeah. My
I feel
youngest
you on
brother,
that. Yeah.
yeah, my youngest brother just doesn't, he was like kind of like doesn't give a shit about like he never was like, I need to be famous or make a lot of, make a
Hmm.
ton of money. He was not obsessed with that stuff in like a kind of the unhealthy way that I was. So I think he's always been like way more grounded,
Hmm.
which is good for him. Good to see.
How old is what's the age difference between you and your youngest brother?
Yeah, it's 5 years. So it was
Okay.
2 years between Dan and I, and then 5 years. Oh, sorry, 3 years between Dan and I, and 5 years between Damien and I.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's cool though. That's really cool. Yeah, no, I think it's really cool. And we had this moment last year, right when COVID hit and everything went into lockdown. So I had to like cancel the rest of my tour. And we're like, you know what? We should just go to Palm Springs and like put our heads down and work and continue building. And that was like, we look back at it and we laugh about it to this day because we were like losing our minds. We're like living together um, for like, I think it was like a month. And all we would do every single day from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep is just like, are we going to survive this? Like, podcasts have no ads, nothing's happening, the future is unclear, what's happening? Like, pulling our hair out and like getting into stupid arguments. And it's it's one of those things where like my sister-in-law, she was just like, you guys will never have another moment like that, but also think about like how cool it is that you guys were able to go through that together. And I think that's something that um it's difficult, but it's also incredibly rewarding and really cool to have gone through.
That's awesome. I love that.
있어도 그래도 떠날래 그래 떠날게 여기서 나가도 아플 땐 아파도 힘들 수 있어도 그래도 떠날래 이제 떠날게